Andrew, welcome to PR.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me.
It's been a long time in the making. Over the COVID period, we talked a lot about you coming down, and I'm stoked that you finally were able to do it.
A lot of threats and a lot of now finally some follow through.
Follow through.
On
Indeed.
my part, not on your part. You've wanted me here for quite some time.
So you're coming down, though, in a very different position than you were last time we talked about you coming down here in the fall. You are now CEO of Douglas Products.
Correct.
So, pest control, effectively corporate development. I mean, you've done all sorts of things. Now you're the CEO of a manufacturing business. How the hell did this happen?
It's an interesting story, and it has everything to do with some business development opportunities that were sort of thrust upon me early on in my career. Mm-hmm. Early on in my career, my dad and a very close friend of his arm twisted me into joining an organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And
really, they were the ones that,
yeah,
you didn't want to do it.
I did not want to join YPO.
Okay.
In 1997 was when I actually joined. I didn't want to join because I was very young in the business. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel that I was truly the leader of Assured Environments at the time. Mm-hmm. And my father's best friend, a guy by the name of Tom Schulhoff, came to me and said, this is exactly the reason why you need YPO. Yep. You need YPO to teach you how to navigate a family business. And doesn't matter how rich everybody else is in YPO, you need YPO for that sort of training. And
you were in your 20s.
I was in my
early
20s.
Okay, so back in 97, your father and a buddy of his said, you got to do this.
Yeah, I got to do this. And YPO was central to every large decision I made in the business throughout my entire business career, even up until joining Douglas Products as CEO. So let's start in the present. Last summer, I was consulting for Rentokil, and I was reporting to John Myers, and I was leading the franchise, the 17 franchises, and helping him be the intermediary between Rentokil, Terminex, and the franchisees.
Yep. Having
a lot of fun doing that, but it wasn't. You know, it was challenging, but it wasn't everything. And I was approached by a YPO friend of mine, a guy by the name of Eric Epstein, and he said, listen, I've got a friend who is the founder of Bright Star Capital in New York, and they're in the hot and heavy due diligence stages of buying Douglas Products. Mm-hmm. And would you be interested in doing some consulting work for them? And there was no conflict with Rentokil because Rentokil is not in the chemical manufacturing business. And I said yes. And I started helping them with due diligence. Bright Star ultimately acquired Douglas Products in September of last year. Yep. And they loved the work that I did, and they suggested I go onto the board. I said yes to that. And about a month, 5 weeks after acquisition, the CEO decided that he wanted Wes Long, a lovely guy, decided he wanted to do something different. He'd done this for quite some time, and offered his resignation. And 4 weeks after that, by the end of November, or even longer, I found myself with the opportunity to be the CEO of a manufacturing chemical maker in this industry.
So Douglas, if I remember correctly, the core products of the company are agricultural industrial fumigants, right?
Correct.
And that's Vicane gas?
Vicane and Profume.
Okay.
So Vicane is the label which is used for structural pest, primarily for termites. Okay. In Florida, California, even parts of the Gulf Coast. And then Profume is the post-agricultural label. Same exact molecule, just a different label, used all over the world to fumigate agricultural products that are on the label. So I'm now in the agricultural space and also in the structural pest control space.
Is the majority of the perfume sold overseas?
No, actually, the majority is pretty much here in the U.S., in California, and in the Midwest. So grain silos,
Go.
that sort of thing. The nut industry in California, timber in the EU. Yeah,
Douglas Products is based in Missouri.
Liberty, Missouri.
You guys manufacture out in California.
In Pittsburgh, California.
Okay.
So the history of Douglas is it's really a private equity, dream story in a way.
Okay.
Douglas was actually started by an individual in Liberty, Missouri, and then Altamont Capital, the previous sponsor owner of prior to Brightstar Capital, Altamont acquired Douglas Products and also the Vicane and Profume labels from Dow Corteva, and I believe it was 2012. And yeah, so they acquired it. They put everything together. They brought in a new CEO, Wes Long, and they built it for a period of time.
And how do you, now that Douglas has a new financial sponsor, how do you grow a business like that? Because there's only, I would imagine you guys already have a massive market share in your particular product lines already, right?
Yeah.
So is it adding additional products?
So there's 2 or 3 prongs to the strategy on growth for me right now. And the interesting thing for me is that it brings all different sorts of strands of my career together. How to build a business organically, how to build a business through M&A because of my M&A experience at Terminex, and international. So all those 3 strands together, pulled together, are what are going to grow this thing. So presently, Douglas has 85% market share of the structural pest control termite fumigation market here in the U.S. So there's not a whole lot more that we can grow that, but we have less market share in the post-agricultural side of things. So we really want to try and grow the business organically, focusing on ag, and both ag here in the U.S. and ag outside of the U.S. In Mexico, in the EU. We're about to enter Malaysia, Pakistan. And yeah, so that is the organic side of things. And we actually just, I was very, very lucky to have the opportunity to bring Eric Schroeder on board, who was a sales leader both at Terminex and also at Copasan. And he's leading our commercial sales effort now.
So what will he focus on? Domestic sales?
So he's the chief revenue officer. Okay. He will focus on domestic and also international sales. And we have historic sales leaders in the organization who are still here. The beauty of Brightstar Capital actually is that they are believers in building and investing in businesses rather than taking them apart and financially engineering them. So much of the original Dow Corteva team that was on site during the Altamont acquisition have continued to stay and be leaders here at Douglas today too.
One thing I don't understand about that is Douglas Products, did they exist prior to owning Vicane and Profume?
Yes.
Were they the manufacturer of that?
No.
So
Douglas Products was started by an individual in Liberty, Missouri, and it was primarily an amalgamation of agricultural products and heating and coolants, chemicals, heating and coolant chemicals, about 6 different chemicals, and it was about a $6 million business at the time that Altamont bought the SF molecule and combined it together with this Douglas Products and used Douglas as the corporate entity to be the parent of everything.
I see. So for Brightstar, this is brand new. These guys are digging right in right now. You guys are forging strategy here for the future. You're bringing on some talented folks that you've known from years past. As you start to think about what you're going to be doing in this business, how do you feel like you're going to put your unique Andrew Klein fingerprints on this based upon, I mean, you've been in the pest control industry really since you graduated school,
Yeah.
for the most part, right?
Yeah. I came from a third generation family business. I didn't originally envision myself in this industry. And even though when I was 16 years old, I went to go work for my dad, I ran a route in New York City. And that was during a period of the 1980s when people were spraying and praying. And I was given a B&G sprayer as a 16-year-old and a stack of work tickets.
Yeah.
And I was told, go complete these work tickets in a day and come back at the end of the day and hand them in. And I remember walking into my first account as a teenager and sort of not knowing what to do. And I went into an apartment building and the super came to me and said, I know where you need to treat. I'm going to show you what you need to do. You need to spray here, spray there, and that's what I want you to do. I'll sign your ticket, leave. And I was like, this is this business? And I had a really sort of negative feeling about the business in the 1980s. And as I was in college and when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I was like, this is not how I envision. This is not a precise business. This is not a business that it feels really positively about itself. And I wasn't wild about going into it. And
weren't you studying humanities at Dartmouth at the time?
I was a history major, European history major, and I had a girlfriend at the time that convinced me to go get a MA, PhD in French history, and that's what I started.
Okay.
And I remember graduating college, and my dad said, before you start your master's, I just want you to take one more look at the business before you decide that you don't ever want to do this ever again. And I did, and the business was about a $3 million business at that period of time, and it was a commercially focused business, and all of the largest customers in the business were my dad's friends. And I remember shadowing my dad as a 21 or 22-year-old, going to visit his biggest customers and saying to myself, gosh, how in the world do I carve out my own identity in this business with my dad being so central to it? And my dad at that time was very young. He was in his early 50s. And so I just said, listen, I'm going to listen to that girlfriend. I'm going to go get a PhD. I'll go become a teacher. I'll go do something different. And not thinking about how I was going to support myself or anything like that. Overnight, my dad decided to double the size of the business by bringing a partner into the business. And I remember it was 1992, and I was in graduate school, and this partner was 75 years old at the time, and he invited me out to an old school Italian restaurant in New York City, a restaurant called Pietro's. And I remember vividly going to this restaurant, ordering, the specialty chicken Pietro over, it was during a period of time where it was a 1 or 2 martini lunch. And this 75-year-old was trying to convince me that I needed to give the business another shot, because now the business was not a $3 million business, it was a $6 million business. And he needed me particularly because he was worried if my dad got hit by a bus, he was going to be partners with my mom, a widow, and he didn't want that.
Yeah.
And he was too old to sort of try and run the business all on his own. And overnight, I went back home, I thought about it, I said, you want to know something? I'm going to do this, I'm going to try it, and I never looked back.
What made you come to that conclusion? It wasn't to save him
Yeah.
your dad died, what was it?
I felt that it was important for my family to do it because my brother wasn't going to go into the business. It's a whole other story. My brother is a wildly successful hotel guy in California and New York. And I felt that I owed it to my mom, to be quite honest, and even my dad, to really seriously consider it. And overnight, I realized that I was going to become the most educated exterminator in the world by doing this.
Yep. So that's how it happened.
That's how it happened, yeah.
And you were there nonstop, basically, until ultimately the ultimate sale of the business.
Yeah. So we sold the business in 2019, and part of the reason that we sold it, again, had to do with YPO and various opportunities that that YPO sort of like put into my head. And I really believed that there was more for me to do in the industry and the world, watching what my YPO friends were doing with their family businesses. And I realized that if I wanted to grow my business in a certain way, both geographically, possibly internationally, and possibly into other lines of business, I couldn't do it by just owning Assured Environments in New York. I needed to sell it. And it was a moment in time, actually, when my dad was also getting treated for blood cancer.
I remember that. I think everyone thought your father might not make it that period, right?
Knock wood.
Yeah.
He's in terrific shape today. He completely beat the cancer. There's a very rare form of cancer called amyloidosis. And he had chemo, he had stem cell transplants, his own stem cells, and he's now 83 years old, and he's not going to die of this cancer. He's going strong.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so, do you think that had an influence on the decision then at the time?
Well, it had a big influence on my dad, because my dad was very worried about my mom and the liquidity that my mom might or might not have if he didn't make it through the cancer. It was a moment in time where he was in a mind frame that he was okay to sell the business. My mom was in a mind frame where she was totally okay for us to sell the business. And I wanted to, do more. And at the time, we had just sold Copasan to Terminex. And Terminex came knocking on my door, wanting me to help more and more with them with their international strategy. And I realized that, no matter how many years I stayed in Assured Environments in New York City at my desk, I was never going to have an opportunity to help build a business in China, help build a business in Europe. And I was seduced and I sold. And I don't regret it at all. It's opened up so many other opportunities for my career, to be challenged, to be pushed. And while I'm 57 years old and I'm not necessarily a young kid any longer, I realized at the time when I sold in 2019 that if I didn't do it then, I might regret for the rest of my life that I never really challenged myself business-wise, and I just sat there in my business waiting for my dad to die.
If you think back to when you sold that business, I mean, how active were you at that time in the day-to-day operations?
Very, very active.
Yeah.
Every day with my team, I lived and breathed the business. The challenge at the time, after we sold, was how do you become a corporate guy at Terminex or service master and still, have the same drive when it's not your own business. And I was able to translate my experience as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and slot myself into that new world. It was different. It was a challenge, but it was a challenge that I openly accepted and loved and relished. And it's helped me today figure out and navigate, what it's like, because working for a private equity firm is very different from working for a public company. But there are certain learnings that I acquired at Terminex that have really served me very well. Whatever you want to say about Terminex taught me that a culture of measuring is absolutely important. And it was not exactly something that I learned in my family business, because I had to report whether I was on the M&A team or whether I was, the vice president of operations of the commercial Northeast, which I was for about a year and a half. There was a culture of measurement at Terminex that was, was perfection, and really, really taught me how to think of my business or whatever business I was in a different set of terms.
You sold that business in 17, if I remember?
2019.
2019. Well, it was the first part of the year, right? Like March-ish? Is that right? March?
At the end of 2018, early January of 2019.
Right. Because then fast forward, you spent a lot of time with Nick and with Dion.
Yes.
Those guys had huge plans, acquisitions in Asia, doubling down on Europe. They were already kind of looking at no more at that time. They had
Yep.
plans to really just blow that thing out.
Yep.
And you sell your business, then all of a sudden, Stevenson quits or gets canned. I don't even remember what happened back then, but the president of Terminex is gone. Nick departs shortly thereafter. Dion steps into focusing on something different within the organization, so everything changed.
Brett came in.
And yeah, then Brett came on, then we had Kim, and then you go another year or so, and then there's the announcement that Rentokil's coming in to buy Terminex. So now you have that integration. So you went through an intense time of change at Terminex onto Rentokil. I think Rentokil was a great experience for you overall.
100%.
At what point, though, were you starting to think about your next steps? Meaning, you ended up coming to Douglas because of a YPO buddy, right? Somebody who you've known for a long time, and it was a perfect opportunity. But I don't really recall you out there being active, trying to figure out. Like, you weren't out there applying for things. You were just focused on what you had to do.
I envisioned myself and my career at Terminex for, I knew that there was always the possibility that I would have to recreate a career, that there was a possibility that I would get fired, that I would fail miserably.
Yep.
And it was a chance and that I was willing to take. But I never really thought of myself like, wow, I'm going to sell this business, and then once my non-compete, non-solicit is over, I'm going to go back into becoming an operator. I'm going to go back into, I'll go create assured environments all over again, or maybe I'll go now into the residential market and do something like that. No, I never thought of that.
Because that's one of the reasons why you actually sold, is you'd run that for a while. You wanted to have
something entirely new. And I got something entirely new. And when the Rentokil deal came through to acquire Terminex, I organically knew this was the absolute correct deal for both of these two companies. But I also organically knew that I was going to be out of an opportunity to continue working in the same way that I had been working at Terminex, because Rentokil had people, wonderful people, doing what I was doing already at Terminex for Terminex. And I spent the opportunity that Rentokil gave me was to stay on as a consultant as long as I wanted. And I had a great year there working for John, and I think the world of John. But I never envisioned myself going back and becoming the entrepreneurial operator that I had been.
Andrew, I want to go back to what you were talking about a minute ago. We talked about Douglas Products, and they have got 85% of the fume market share. Right?
Structural pest,
and
termite market share, yep.
I mean, that's obviously massive. And so it's really hard to grow a business that's already got 85% of the market share, right? I mean, you can get to 100%. So clearly, you guys will be adding on additional products.
Correct.
Sometimes companies will go out and, be in like traps and termite baiting, and you've got a mix of different sorts of things. And my impression, that's probably not the path you're going to go down to.
Right.
But as you start to formulate strategy and think about how do you grow this business, would you guys go out and would you think about acquiring relatively mature businesses? Would you think about, I get calls all the time from these guys that are tinkerers, and a lot of stuff has been invented by tinkerers, right?
Right.
You got all these small little companies, all these guys, right?
Right.
You're at Pest World, they run up to you and say, hey, look at this. I mean, would you consider going out and buying ideas, so to speak? I mean, where's your thoughts on all this?
So my thoughts are yes to all of that. The reality is what's going to move the needle is not necessarily buying an idea and buying something relatively young, but buying something that has quite a bit of EBITDA, quite a bit of revenue, and has a lot of maturity. So that's going to move the needle. But at the same time, I'm also in the process of bringing on an M&A leader that's going to help me go out and find those younger ideas, those younger businesses that will also add diversity to this single molecule. The M&A strategy that I have right now is I've got to leave my imprint here. I've got to bring diversity to this company. I've got to do it in a big way and in an opportunistic way, and with smaller opportunities, big opportunities, small opportunities, and that's what Brightstar wants me to do, to add value to the business.
You know, Viking Gas is a fumigant and it's odorless, colorless, right?
Correct.
Is that why this is potentially so dangerous?
You know, this is a molecule that if it's not used in a safe and trained manner, you need to continually train technicians and companies on the use of the molecule. Douglas, from the beginning of the 1960s when Dow brought this to market, focused on stewardship. So training and safety and if people, have a semblance of cutting corners, we don't sell them. So it's.
And how do you know that? Like, how do you know?
Well, if there's ever a violation or an infraction and a complaint, it trickles up to the company and we vet it, and that user is done. And over time, there have been many people who have bought the product, used it, abused it. You're done.
Out.
Yeah. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it because it's that important to this company.
So you're down here in Puerto Rico. You're going to be seeing some old YPO buddies here, I guess, in my chapter down here,
Yes.
huh? I know you personally, and you and Emily Thomas, actually, before I joined YPO, I remember both of you said something very similar things to me, which was like, it's singly one of the most important professional decisions that I've made in my life.
Glenn Rollins, too, was in YPO.
That's right. And so it was you and Emily actually were driving, and Jason Pananos and Jay Davis at BDCI, which are now part of Rentokil, they were in it, but you guys kind of pushed me over the edge and finally joining it, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. Like for me, it's been phenomenal. But I mean, what aspects of YPO do you take advantage of? Because we've got everything from forum to chapter meetings to educational events to, I'm very, as you well know, I tap into our overseas network because I travel overseas all the time. And like if I'm popping into Turkey or wherever I'm going into, I'll reach out to the chapter, see who's around. I'm a member actually of the Philippines chapter as well. It's this country I do a lot of business in. So what has YPO meant to you?
YPO to me is something a little bit more domestic and maybe a little bit more mundane, but it has been a part of every large business decision in my career. So when I referenced, my father's 75-year-old business partner, in 2006, my dad and I decided that it was time. Thank you. It was time to buy him out, and the strategy was that my father already had 50% of the business. I had a much smaller percentage, and the idea was for me to go and buy the partner's shares. I didn't have the money to do it. I needed $6 million in 2006, and I didn't have $6 million sitting around anywhere for me to go buy the shares. And I remember going to a YPO meeting, a breakfast meeting on ESOPs, and I started thinking, wow, this is a brilliant strategy. ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan. And essentially what it is, it's gifting shares of the business, potentially, to your employees to get a tax advantage. And my problem with not having $6 million was that If I borrowed $6 million, I'd have to pay full boat tax on that $6 million. And what I realized with an ESOP was that by getting my employees ownership of the business, I could reduce my tax burden, but I could also enlist my employees to become my partners in making sure that I paid all that money back, and then some, and they were now owners of the business. So that was an idea that came to me through YPO. We sold 20% of the business, or gifted 20% of the business to the employees. So
Over what time period?
it was over about a 7-year time period.
Go.
And after I did that, my employees became so focused on growth, so focused on the business in a way that they hadn't been before this. Because before this, it was Andrew and Bob and Ted Barron, the partner, were owners, and we had great jobs, and they're nice guys, and we get nice bonuses. But now they had skin in the game, and the business grew considerably faster and larger because of that organic growth, separate from whatever acquisitions we made.
It made that big of a difference.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And when you think about even like working for a company like Terminex or Rentokil, or even working for a private equity firm where you can be gifted B shares, or a private family business never does that, right? I mean, you could gift phantom stock, but this was actually gifting ownership. And I changed lives by doing that. In fact, I remember talking to one of my managers about a year after we sold the business, a gal by the name of Teresa Siebold, and she called me to thank me because she was able to pay off her first home. She was able to buy a home in Florida. And she said to me, I changed her life and her family's life by that. That's the most important thing I've done in business. You said to me, Andrew, what is the most important thing you've done in your life in business?
That was it.
That decision was the most important decision.
It's easy to see that in retrospect after you have an exit where these folks monetize that and they get a bushel of cash. But in those early years when you did that ESOP, they're getting relatively meaningless certificates.
Correct.
I would imagine employees looking at this and being like, okay, well, what does this mean to me?
Right.
And so how did that work?
Got to create a culture of inclusion and a culture of sharing of exactly what's happening in the business and what exactly those shares could theoretically mean. And you're right, in those first few years, there were many old timers that said, this is old timers from my dad's day that said, this is meaningless, or I don't see the payoff in this. And I know one guy in particular that retired about a year too soon and left a lot of money on the table by doing that. And my dad begged him, don't do this. And he retired, and he walked away from.
So he has to tender those shares back to the company?
Yeah. If whatever he had earned up until that point was his. But the reality was, until we actually had the exit that we had, those shares were valued at a considerably lower
fair
amount.
market value versus like an investment value of a transaction.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
All of that.
Gotcha.
And he also left shares on the table that he walked away from.
So over that course of time, would you sit down with somebody like me and say, Paul, I know that piece of paper doesn't mean much to you, but right now it's worth $5,000. And if we keep growing like this, it's going to be worth 10, and that's going to be worth 50. Is that the sort of conversations you had?
Those were the conversations that I was having.
And
yes.
Did you tie them to metrics, saying like, hey guys, if we hit these numbers, they're likely to be worth?
I didn't. And that's because I didn't truly believe that I was going to sell the business until it dawned on me that I should sell the business. I didn't do that. I wasn't that mercenary. But in retrospect, it would have made a whole lot of sense to do that. But I didn't do it. I wasn't that smart.
Well, you can't know these things.
You can't know these things until you don't know them, right?
So you were at a YPO breakfast. You heard somebody talk about ESOPs. You needed $6 million about the partner, I should say, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's do an ESOP. What else have you taken out of YPO?
How to negotiate, how to do M&A. YPO has actual seminars on mergers and acquisitions. And over the years, when I knew that I needed to school myself on M&A, I went to YPO. And YPO also has seminars and programs at Harvard. I did that. So whatever I needed to learn in business that I didn't get from my own education, I made sure to grab from YPO.
Are you going to do any events this year?
There is a wonderful program that I'm looking at Oxford University in the UK.
Which program?
It's a business program. There's also another business program at INSEAD in Paris also that I may very well do in May.
I think that's in the fall. Oh, it's in May?
Maybe it's in the fall.
I thought it was in the fall. Go.
Yeah. So YPO for me is really about rounding out all the sort of like blind spots that I've had in my business life, because I didn't go to business school. I got this degree in French history.
Yeah.
I need to learn. I need to learn somewhere. Somebody needs to teach me.
Yes. And I would imagine, like every major business decision you've made, you've probably talked about it with your forum.
So my forum, 100%. My forum has been, and I've been in 3 different forums over the almost 30 years that I've been in YPO. And each forum mate has been as an important sounding board as I could have ever asked for. And mostly everyone comes from a different walk of life and a different business experience, whether in finance or manufacturing or other service industries. And just to be able to pose them with a problem or an opportunity, whether to acquire a new business, to sell my assured environments, what does that mean? How do I go about doing that? What are the professionals that I need to go and tap into?
Yeah.
They were with me every step of the way, and it was like having a board of directors, if you will, that are just there for you, and they don't have an axe to grind, and they're just there to protect me and my interest, my family interest.
That's great. So Andrew, Bright Start buys this thing the end of last year. How long, did you make any commitments to them as to how long you're going to stay?
Sure. I did, and I made a commitment to stay with them through the turn of the business to the next sponsor owner, and that's at least 7 or 8 more years.
Okay. So you've committed to them. What about, you've only been at this a few months, and so this is different for you because you own the family business, then you work for a huge corporate, and now this is one of those pure play standalone businesses that's owned by a private equity firm. You appear to have a great relationship with the Bright Star guys. What's your first 6 months on the job as a CEO look like? You spend your time doing? I would imagine, you know the business, you know the fumigants, you know the players, but I'd imagine you've had a lot of homework to do.
Sure, a lot of homework to do because I've never been in the manufacturing space. So I've spent a lot of time with my head of regulatory. I spent a lot of time with my head of operations and my CFO to understand the dynamics of this business. It's not a service business, right? We're measuring how many pounds of fumigant we're selling, how many cylinders of fumigant we're selling into which markets, and we have to be able to predict, how we hit certain targets. And so it's a completely different sales cycle, completely different sales measurement, if you will, than when I was at Assured or even when I was at Terminex. You'd think about, salespeople have got a pipeline and, they've got so and so many opportunities in the pipeline, and they've got a conversion rate, and you can therefore predict how much organic growth you're going to drive into the business through that. It's completely different here because this business is really tied to how successful fumigators are, specifically on the structural side, how successful fumigators are in getting opportunities to fumigate homes, right? So when interest rates go high, fewer home inspections get done, and therefore fewer termites are found because, termites are unusual creatures. They don't always present themselves unless somebody pays for an inspection because they're selling their house. So as interest rates have gone a little bit higher, we've had to figure out ways how to drive growth. One of the interesting things that I've been challenged to do, and I've spent a lot of time, and that's why I brought Eric into the company, Eric Schroeder. In the past, the molecule sold itself, right? So my first priority here was how do we take control of our business and become more proactive in everything that we do and drive growth rather than wait for the opportunity to come. Play offense rather than be passive. And that has been an unbelievable opportunity, but it's also been a challenge. And we've been doing that both on the organic sales side and everything in the business. We're playing offense continuously.
It makes me wonder, I've never been in the position where I've come in and I haven't held a real job for many, many moons. But I've never been brought in as the CEO of something. But I do know, in my advisory capacity, sometimes you have a personal, I don't even know how to say this, but you're new CEO. You show up to the job. Everyone probably has a natural inclination to want to do something to prove their value, right? You're the new guy on the block, you're the new CEO, so shit, I gotta change this or make this work. Or do you find yourself fighting that?
That's a great question. And it goes to the heart of working for a private equity firm, because private equity is all about, or at least this wonderful private equity firm that I'm working for is all about investment and growth. And it is really, it's interesting because there's no time to waste here. They've got a timeline, they're 5 to 7 years at the max that they want me to have my effect on the business. And so I've got to hit the ground running. My team's got to hit the ground running. And there's, I started at the end of November. There's not let's go see if we can learn about the business in a year. The greatest part about this business for me is that every one of the largest customers of Douglas products that we sell through distribution, every single one of our largest customers are friends and acquaintances of mine for the last 30 years in the industry.
Guys, right.
So I've never been in a position until now where the people that I'm selling to and that I'm selling with are friends and they're partners. So that's a great thing. It's a challenge, right? Because if you're friends with everybody, everybody comes to ask you for a favor, right? It's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? But it's a really interesting opportunity.
That's great. I'm glad you're doing this, actually. I was shocked when you took the role. I was just like, manufacturing now. But it seems like it would be, at the end of the day, when you've been successful in life, you always need to find a new challenge. And I think this is going to actually be a challenge for you.
It is a huge challenge.
It's not going to be easy street.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's not just a job. Brightstar asked me to co-invest with them.
Okay.
So I'm an owner and I put skin in the game, and it's not just me trying to check a box. I really do believe in what I'm doing.
You made me think of the hair club. You remember the old hair club for men commercials?
I still have hair.
I'm also a client. I'm not ugly. Yeah. But you do. I know.
It's mine.
Maybe I'm the one that paid attention to those commercials. You never had to, right? No, but that's great though. So you co-invested in this. You've got some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm having a ton of fun at it. It's I was too young to. Even at the end of when I heard the news, that Rentokil wanted me to consult and sort of take it more easy, I could have retired. But I've got 4 kids. Two of my kids are grown. 2 of them are younger. One's just graduating high school this year. The other one is a 15-year-old freshman in high school. And I said to myself, I'm 57 years old. I'm not a good golfer. What is it going to show my children for me just to go sort of like knocking about the world and just, having fun? And I really felt it was important to show my kids that you got to give it your all, no matter what, no matter how much money you've made in whatever part of life, you've got to give it your all, and you just don't hang up your cleats until it's time.
I mean, how do you really have fun if there's no challenge, right?
Right.
And you do suck at golf, so that would. So I get that.
Everyone knows I suck at golf.
But like Bob Klein, how old's that dude?
Dad is going to be 83.
Yeah, I mean, he's still working.
Yeah.
He's still consulting.
Yeah.
He was at a meeting in New York a couple months ago, and the Mexican showed up. Your dad's consulting, and
Yeah.
if anyone should wind it down, it's him.
That's right.
But I guess he's not going to do that.
No.
Andrew, thanks so much for coming down. It's great to
my
finally
pleasure.
see you here in Puerto Rico. My final question for you, as you head out of here in Puerto Rico, what's kind of the next stop on your train? What are you doing?
So it's interesting that you asked that question. I'm headed back to New York, but I'm actually headed down to an investor conference for Brightstar Capital at the Breakers on Thursday and Friday. And I am being showcased as this new CEO of this first investment of their Fund 3. Brightstar is actually, it's a $4+ billion private equity fund. And so Douglas was the first company that they acquired in their Fund 3. And I've never done that before. I've never been at an investor conference. So all these new opportunities are before me, and who knows where this leads.
Are you going to have to speak at that?
Oh yeah, I'm presenting my ideas for growth and what is my strategy, how did I get here?
Are we warming you up then?
This is my warm up for that.
That's great. Yeah. Well, next time I get up to New York, which will be in the next month or two, I'll have to. Every time I go
come
up
to
there,
my new office.
I was going to say I want the tour of the office, because every time I go there, I meet you at a diner, I meet you at a dinner place, never in an office. This time we do in the office.
Yeah, we're in the old CBS building, 51 West 52nd Street, Black Rock building.
Right there in Midtown.
Yeah, right there in Midtown West, right near the Museum of Modern Art, where you and I have spent
I think we've had
a drink or two.
We've definitely been there. That's a great. What's that bar there?
The Modern.
The Modern.
The Modern. It's funny, I made a mistake. The last time I'd been at that bar, I was there with you, and I had this great dinner, and we sat at the bar and had drinks.
That's right.
And one of my new Douglas attorneys, actually international attorney, was coming into New York from the UK, and since my office is across the street, I decided to make a reservation there. I didn't realize that, this attorney was going to take me out to lunch, right? But I didn't realize by making a reservation in the fancy restaurant, it's a set menu. It's like a $200+ set menu per person. And when we walked in and we saw this, I felt absolutely guilty. This poor guy was not expecting to spend $500 on lunch. So.
Yeah. That's fantastic, Andrew. Well, brother, as always.
Thank you, man.
Great seeing you.
Thank you.
Perfect. I loved it.
Yeah. I loved it.